to welcome everybody. So I just started the recording. Introduce myself. My name is Eric Rosenberg. I usually live and work in Toronto, Canada. I guess a lot of my work, both personally and professionally, has been around learning to be more self-starting. It feels like I've done this work both in the sort of traditional high school classroom, in the alternative ed environment, and then working directly with young people, both teenagers and young adults, trying to, I guess, help transition to a more project-based, self-directed, student-directed model of learning. And I guess there are some out there who are obvious self-starters. When they have an idea or they have an inclination, they're in position to really go make that happen. I am not that way, and a number of the young people who I've met and worked with are also not that way. And I guess one thing I've heard, especially from parents in conventional education, saying that, well, not everybody is entrepreneurial. And I guess my work is really to counter that, to say, well, maybe that's true, not everybody is entrepreneurial, but everybody is capable of enterprise, and everybody is capable of creating. Everyone is enabled in some way. And what if we use that as the sort of launching point? What might learning look like in that kind of capacity? And a lot of this work I'm doing is within institutional context, but even just this sort of, I was reading actually a relationship book, and I thought I'd join this. It says that there's a fear of confronting the fear of confronting the unfamiliar is stronger than the desire to explore the world. That is, there is a real fear, and a lot of the students that I'm working with, I would identify them as either institutionalized or apathetic. That is, they're either looking for the path to success, or they're looking to the path to success, or they're apathetic. They're bored. So, anyways, that's just a roundabout way of talking. I'm going to use the slides to try to do more of this prompting. But before we get going, I guess I want to invite you to interact here. You can see there's a map. There should be a map up on your screen. And if you look at the left side of your page, you'll notice there's an arrow pointing to a square. There's a star. So if you actually push the star and then push the star again, you can move onto the board and maybe mark where in the world you're starting from today. You can see I just marked Chicago, and I invite you to let us know. Oh, I need to enable the whiteboard. I think I need to. There we go. Thank you, Steve. So now the whiteboard should be enabled, and so we've got, it looks like Portland and California, Florida. Okay, Asheville, North Carolina. Terrific. It really is. I think it's really affirming to know that there's an opportunity for people who are interested in a more humanist, perhaps, approach to learning, to congregate and share ideas. And I'm really happy. And Shelbina, is that Missouri? As a Canadian, I'm a little unfamiliar with some of the state abbreviations, but I'm pretty sure that's Missouri. And Salt Lake City, Utah. Fantastic. Okay, well, welcome all. Maybe let's try this. Let's try a poll. So maybe A would be teachers, B would be parents, C would be students, D would be admin, and E would be other. Let's do a little poll of who we are. So I think the way to do that, am I going to do this right, Steve, is if you go to the, if you look just above who's in the room, you'll see there's a drop-down menu where it says respond to poll. It's a little letter. And maybe push one of the letters that responds to you. So we've got so far 2 teachers. Do I have to enable something else? No, you should have chat permissions on. So again, if you look under where it says talk, you should see 4 icons. One is a smiley face, one is like a little clock, one is a hand to raise your hand, and if you do have a question, please put that out. Steve thought he was a parent. Okay, so he answered A. So we have parents. So 2 parents, 1 teacher so far. Lynn wants Lynn. Yeah, there you go. I think that was Lynn just responded. Oh no, Lynn, are you able to? I don't want to take up too much of your time, but just so you understand, there's an interactive element here. It's 4 horizontal icons: smiley face, clock, hand, and the letter A. So if you just push the A, it should give you some options, just to get a sense of who we are in the room. Okay, so that's true. And I mean, a lot of, where I'm coming from is wanting to, okay, so slides have been loaded, wanting to work with, really, it started with teachers to say that, that our students are more engaged when they're doing project-based, self-directed learning, yet we seem inclined towards, a more teacher-centric, prescriptive model of education. And how can we support young people to engage in this kind of practice, in a way that we still are doing our job. And I think that I think there's that's a real challenge. How do we make that transition? And where I've come from it, and certainly this isn't this is not a prescriptive approach. But where I found a lot of success, and what I'd like to share with you today, is how I'm really using the principles of finance around money and investment to connect to the sort of practice of positive psychology around meaningfulness and passion and values, and connecting that to some of the tools that design thinking offers us to help all parties, students, teachers, parents, admin, make the transition to a more student-directed, self-starting model of education where all of us can feel like we're being successful without necessarily knowing where it is that we're going to arrive at. And so really in this service, I identify 2 real distinct elements, and one is a service element and one is a control element. So by service, really working with and supporting students and learners, young people, however you want to refer to them, as being decision makers, and really helping them feel capable and enabled in their choices and as decision makers. So that's sort of the first piece that I'm going to address is servicing learners, and second is that sort of that control piece, which I think is a lot of what gets focused on in institutional contexts. which is, you know, reporting and holding learners. I think that is holding learners accountable. And oh, that says leaners, but well, let's hold leaners accountable too. But I'm intending in this case holding learners accountable. And I think sometimes we might be trying to do two at once. So, you know, for instance, an assignment. An assignment is an attempt to do both at once. An assignment is both a prompt to activity, so that's more service, and it's a control piece. How did you do on that? What's the measurement? What's the result? Was it handed in on time? And so those are really two distinct functions, and I think it can be useful to separate them in really trying to help learners become more self-starting. Where am I here? So, so I think that this kind of practice is far more challenging to implement in a traditional classroom context, but it certainly has held value in alternative learning environments. And there again is a spelling mistake. So as I tell the young people I work with, what's important is, are you communicating, and to what extent is your message being received? So if in some case you're struggling to understand or would like some clarification, please let me know. Actually, your mics, I think, are enabled too, so if anybody wants to jump in, I invite you to do so. You know, it's and maybe to start with the finance piece. So I'll sometimes when I first start working with a group or with an individual, I'll tell them the story of these three individuals: an attorney, an educator, and a store clerk. And I'll ask them the question, who's wealthiest? And you know, that conversation can go in any number of directions. It's really always delightful when young people, you know, bring up that question: well, what is wealth? How are you measuring wealth? You know, wealth for one person isn't wealth for another, and it's terrific to see that kind of broad-mindedness. And then I'll be, yeah, you know, that's all really legitimate. But from a purely financial standpoint, who's the wealthiest here? Who has the most financial worth? And in almost all cases, they'll indicate that they believe the attorney is the wealthiest. Why? Because they make the most money. And I'll go through a series of anecdotes describing their lifestyle. You know, the attorney, she shops for this and she lives this, and the teacher, and so on and so forth. And the sort of end result is to try to use this very basic premise of finance, which is you know, revenues minus expenses equals profit, or what comes in minus what goes out equals what's left over. And that it isn't about how much money you make, or it isn't even about how much money you spend. It's really saying, are you able to spend less than you earn? And so this is sort of a very simple, really simplistic approach to financial literacy. And what I'm trying to really drive here is the sort of notion that ownership or investment or spending on things that might go up in value are really a key element of financial wealth, you know, and in that is sort of is managing risk, is making choices, and trying to create for the future. And so I'm fond of trying to articulate that, you know, jobs don't make people wealthy. You know, a job will never make you wealthy. A job, you know, while a very necessary part of life for many of us, really you're putting your energy into something that is being owned or by someone else. And really that the two behaviors of people who are financially successful is that they spend less than they earn, or spend less than you earn, and spend some of it on things that might go up in value. As a sort of third caveat to that, we also have distinguished between investment debt and consumer debt. But really just these two pieces are really trying to put the onus on students to say, it's what you create. That's where value flows from. And what I found, where am I here? What I found is that it's really engaging, especially for teenagers, young adults too, because they don't tend to have a lot of this no-nonsense, straightforward talk about money. And so it's an unusual premise for conversation, and at its core, it's saying, I can't tell you where to invest. I barely know for myself, but I know that you should invest. And I know that it's really these two behaviors. It's spending less than you earn, so that could be you earn, $1 million, could be you earn $5,000. It's about behavior, it's about choice, it's about habits. And that one habit you really want to get into is creating future value. And that kind of sets up the culture, right? This idea about, okay, success is about creating. And so it's establishing a sort of a business mind to say there's no pursuit in the world that can't be turned into a business, but it's up to each one of us to begin that initiative. So what does that look like? One of the first activity I might do with them, if that's a premise, the first activity I do with them is like, who do I admire? What does success look like to me? If I look out into the world, what are the markers in my eyes of successful living? And in my experience, I've heard really two main categories of people. One is celebrity, Jay-Z, 50 Cent. These are people who are held up as being success. And the other is mom. I hear a lot that when I picture success, mom is successful. And really, here I have a sort of heavy bias around where I'm trying to help young people connect, and that's the idea that that the people we admire have built things, have created things. That Jay-Z is he learned to dance or rap. No one told him to do that. He came to that himself. Mom, she has invested herself in family, in raising a household, in relationship, in health, in her career, her community, whatever it is it might be, spiritual practice. That even if the markers of success are Jay-Z having such and such a car, or mom having taken such and such a holiday, the reason they're in that position is because they've invested in something. And that while that holds true in a very narrow mind around finance, that can also be true or truthful in the sort of broader application of life. That it's about investing in yourself, not just financially, but in a variety of aspects of life. And that time and energy are also a currency that work very similar to money, that the things we choose indicate what we value. And really working with young people to see themselves as enabled decision makers. And so another activity I do here is one is, how do I spend my time? Because a lot of us, especially if we are not self-starting, if we are sort of fear of confronting the unknown, if we resist change, if we're sort of that infantile, we learn that when we're frustrated or when things are withheld, we get frustrated. That frustration leads to being given things, being satisfied. If that's what we're sort of oriented towards, how do we make that sort of cultural transition to putting effort and energy into things that may be challenging? If the first activity was who do I admire, the second activity is how do I spend my time? What did I do today? Just do a simple accounting exercise about what time did I get up, how did I travel, what did I do for food, how am I spending my time if I had a free, what did I do with my last day with that responsibility, how did I spend that day? And then that sort of leads to broader notions around visioning, and there's so many visioning activities that you can do. Just imagining the future. Here, I think, is a collage that a 16-year-old boy that I've worked with, he put together, just representing, this was his effort to represent sort of what's in his toolbox. What are the capacities that he already has? His personality characteristics, any jobs, family, interests, really just trying to set up that idea of enablement, right? Because anybody who's going to create needs tools. And so once I understand what's in my toolbox, I can either identify a tool that I wish I had, or I can look at my tools and start to think about what is it that I'd like to build. And this is really connecting to the world of positive psychology. I'm going to jump to the next slide here. This was another student indicating some projects that, this was a visioning exercise around projects that, that they were thinking about, that seemed to spark them. And again, there's no commitment here. These are just initial starting off points, really helping kids identify visions of success and a culture of enablement, which in a lot of ways is the biggest challenge in terms of getting people moving. Is when you're institutionalized, you're apathetic, may not necessarily trust yourself. And so what positive psychology tells us is that it's when we experience autonomy, when we feel like we have agency for our own choices, that's when we describe the greatest experience of satisfaction in our lives. And when that energy of ours is put towards things that have meaning, even more so than engagement, and certainly more so than pleasure, when we get to put ourselves towards things that have meaning, that's when people report the greatest satisfaction. So in this kind of context, working with young people, one, to help them transition from that sort of prescriptive model of follow the leader, or else sit at the back of the room bored, towards a more active ownership around creating value around things that they already feel an inclination towards. I'll have when these dialogues or discussions happen, often use them to try to get kids to commit to a project, and really the three rules of thumb that I tend to use are: the projects must be of their own choosing. It has to be a use of their, so number one, that is, it should be a get to do, not a have to do. Making your bed can be a project if you want it to be, but really what you're saying is I want to make my bed, it brings me great pleasure, it's not because somebody's making me do it. And that's okay, really, because these are starting off points. So no matter how small or a project might be, if it's meeting these criteria, I really and wanting to support. Remember, because this is all about service. This is all about service to young people. So some parameters is just to prompt them is they have to be choosing it, a get to do, not a have to do. Use of their personal productive energy. So they have to be able to make the case that they've created something that didn't previously exist. And it can be intangible, right? But so if someone were to say, well, I want to watch television, my response would be, okay, well, how is that creating something? And some kids get pretty clever. Well, I'm building my database of information, and then, is it possible to formalize that? Can you document it? Can you put it down? Can you create something? To push them to take one more step. And of course, at least in my context, it has to be legal. So even while I applaud and enamor certain initiatives by young people to, have parties or grow plants, really needing, at least in our context, for it to be legal activity. And these are really the three parameters in which the projects that they're creating are being developed. And in my inclination. So what are some of the projects I've had? One learner, she committed to having dinner with her grandmother once a week. I had another want to commit to adding 2 inches to his vertical leap. I had another commit to walking his dog every day. I had another commit to walking to school every day. And again, these are all just starting points. It's about shifting that culture. So if they're making that commitment, then that's really a great place to start. What is my role? What's the role of the sort of adults in this circumstance? I think I really see it threefold. One is to offer a model of success. So what I mean by that is as the young people I work with are committing to projects of their own choosing, so am I. So I think last year I committed to playing 3 hours of basketball each week and then made a blog about it. I've made commitments to writing projects, and then also, so just so that the young people with whom we're working and living, so that they can look to what it can look like as opposed to what it has to look like. Secondly, really just celebrating their capacity to make choices, affirming that they have made choices, regardless of the sort of outcomes, and that this is an ongoing process. So if the first, whatever the period of time is, at first I was committing to having dinner with my grandmother every week, well, maybe next and this is actually what happened, she started making dinner for her grandmother every week. And then she started a blog about making dinner for her grandmother every week. And that project resulted in weekly dinners with photographs of the beautiful food and then a written sort of anecdote about something that this young woman learned by her grandmother. And by the end of that sort of project, she really had a beautiful document and was going out into the world and trying to build her readership. So that sort of that enablement, and then just reflecting back the things that young people are saying, especially so if at first, if Jay-Z is who I think is successful, and these are some of the tools I think I have, really taking note of that. So when it comes time to, committing to projects, you're able to prompt young people to see that they have inclinations, that they have curiosities, and that taking a step, even just one step in that direction, might be something that they want to do. Those are really the three roles that in service I see offering tremendous value. Yeah, and then sort of the third piece of this. So we've talked a little bit about what this has to do with finance, using money and the language of money as a way to help young people take ownership, be invested. However you want to think about these, even stewardship. That it's about being active. So finance really provides a lens, I think, to bring people into that kind of active living and learning. And then second is using that activeness to talk about values and personal values and communal values, to help young people recognize that their choices is a currency that they can spend and invest, and in fact, every day they're shaping the lives that they're going to lead. And sort of the third piece I want to connect to is design thinking. I like, and this isn't mine, but the idea that every problem is a design opportunity. And this is, I think this visual was put out by Stanford's design school. And I really, I think that design is a terrific way to help us think about not just service, because design thinking offers a variety of tools to introduce to learners to help them say, okay, well, I think I want to do this. I think I want to walk my dog. I only get home at like 7 o'clock and it's maybe late. It's dark in the winter. How do I figure that out? And design is a means to try to identify new possibilities, test those possibilities, iterate, recreate. So those are terrific tools to help, again, to offer service. They're also terrific tools as administrators, as parents, to help us deal with issues around control and holding young people accountable. To begin with, I'd like to maybe speak to curriculum, where I live and work in Ontario in Canada. This is what our government document looks like, and a lot of what happens in traditional classrooms is really oriented to meeting the targets set up in this document. There's one for every grade, kindergarten through grade 12, every subject. Even in homeschool and alternative ed communities, learners are still expected to demonstrate learning, and oftentimes what I hear from teachers and administrators is, I'm just going to catch my thought for a second here. What I hear from teachers and administrators is, if I have, all my students working on their own projects, that sounds like a lot of work for me. How am I going to demonstrate that they've met the curriculum targets? And my response and my attitude is, well, it's not my job, or it doesn't have to be my job, it doesn't have to be my role to make those connections between their projects and between learner projects and mandated targets. And in fact, one of the things I do as a control mechanism is I use design thinking and introduce design thinking tools to help involve learners in curriculum design. I think conventionally we think about a classroom, a teacher kind of rolls out an obstacle course and invites students to jump through those obstacles. Even the most engaging programs, that are sort of connecting with the urban space and getting kids engaging with the real world. Often those are programs that have been designed by adults, and essentially they're just, rather than the playground, they're more like Disney World. But in my belief, you're still competing with Nintendo. That is, you're still trying to design a program for young people to discover. I think what design thinking does is it really shifts that context, and it says, as a learner, young people, you have the opportunity to design your own program. And so how does that happen? What does that look like? How can I have, a whole bunch of, working with a whole bunch of learners, all working on projects, some in groups, some on their own, different time horizons? How can I be certain that they're going to meet the mandated, whatever the mandate is? And really, in a simple way, I use this kind of framework. The first is, from the outset, make those targets clear. So, if we're doing it in sort of monthly or 6-week or 2-week sessions, give them 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 really simple targets that they understand. Even if it's around a subject that they don't understand, that they're in position to be able to research that. So really what we're saying is, this is the target. So I'm thinking about a grade 11 economics class, maybe. The target was around, the barriers to international trade. Okay, so one of the things you need to demonstrate is barriers to trade. What makes trade difficult? So, you can simplify that as, what are some of the things that stand in the, what are obstacles to making deals with people? In the next month, you need to be able to make a connection between the project you're doing, so let's say that's making dinner for grandma, and the obstacles that stand in the way. 2 is that young people recognize that they need to be accumulating evidence on an ongoing basis. So, and that can look a lot of different ways, whether it's a portfolio, a blog, a Twitter account, a video blog, tracking tools, checklists, so many different ways. But that on a recurring basis, a diary, a journal, every day, ideally, they are taking responsibility for accumulating the evidence of their efforts. Third, that they get feedback onto what it is they're creating, what it is they're learning, and ideally from peers, where they do that with each other, and then finally presenting that information to their community, including you as a mentor, as a facilitator in their life. So in Ontario, where I live and work, one of the requirements for one skill that students need to demonstrate is communication, the ability to communicate. There's also, they need to demonstrate knowledge, they need to demonstrate critical thinking, and they need to demonstrate application of what they're learning. So knowledge, communication, application, and thinking. A tool that I've commonly used are portfolios. This is one student's portfolio, this is their communication section, and so this is like a control mechanism, right? So when students hand this in to me, it's a means by which I can audit the extent to which they've met the required curriculum. Now, ahead of this, they would have had it peer evaluated and feedback. So by the time it gets to me, it's actually been marked. There's a checklist looking for those targets. Each section around knowledge, thinking, application, communication has already been sorted through. And in the early days, when I first introduced these kinds of design tools to students, where I spend most of my time in terms of giving feedback is on their feedback and evaluation of each other's work. I spend less time looking at the actual work and more time holding students accountable to really going through the work of their peers so that they understand what it looks like to give feedback, that they understand that when they audit something, they need to do so with integrity, that when they put their name to something that says, this was a high level of achievement, I found this really interesting, they need to be able to have believed what they said. And so behaving with integrity is really, and validating integrity over compliance is really a fundamental characteristic in having students be part of the control mechanism and do self-evaluation. What else do we have here? Oh, this is an example of a tracking tool. This was for, again, an economics class. So I would have provided them with this broader just schedule, so you can see the printed items. And then it was left for students to fill this in, really trying to get them to pay attention to themselves as decision makers. Did I come to class on time? What am I learning? What exchanges did I make? In that sort of cultural aspect, making a distinction between job and work, job putting energy into someone else's direction, work putting my own productive energy into things of my own choosing, really drawing attention to those kinds of behaviors. So similarly, actually right now, a project I'm working on called U-Track is about trying to, in conventional classrooms, get students to take attendance, right? Attendance, why don't students take attendance? Do they not know if they're in class on time? Of course, students don't take attendance because we don't trust them. We think that if they could say they were on time when they weren't, they would. And so U-Track is a tool that actually both teacher and student input into the system, and then as the learner information matches what parents say, or pardon me, what teachers say, students demonstrate integrity, and then having demonstrated integrity, they receive more and more opportunity to design more and more of their learning experience. Even within the home context, this can even just be a double entry system, a magnet or a piece of paper on the fridge, where each day, the learner is responsible for tracking certain pieces of information. What time did I get up? What is a project that I'm going to explore today? Who is somebody I'm going to reach out to today? And then parents also are responsible for inputting data, around, it can be, what's a request that I have, what's some help that I can offer you. Really just offering an ongoing means of controlling, of being accountable for choices. That's really what this is all about, is implementing systems to be accountable for choices. And so, as the facilitator, the teacher, the parent, really the roles here in helping learners take on or shifting this sort of control mechanism. One is targets need to be understood from the outset. So even if the learner doesn't understand even if it's something about biology, it's a term they haven't heard before, whatever it is, that they understand that there is a goal, that they're going to be responsible for making connection, right? That's really what we're asking for. So even if my project is around having dinner with grandma and it's some kind of biology function, you can talk about something to do with the digestive. I mean, I'm being even a little more too concrete around the digestive system, but it's really putting the onus on the learner to say, this project that you're creating, make a connection between that project and this target. And it's possible because, you know, I think the thing that's so valuable to understand is that curriculum areas, you know, English, Spanish, geography, science, math, these are really just frameworks for looking at the world. And so what we look at, you know, if we're looking at Dinner with Grandma, we can look at that from an artistic or an aesthetic point of view. We can look at it from a scientific point of view. We can look at it from an economic point of view, from a language point of view. There's no point of view that we can't look at it from. So really what we're saying is to the learner, there's something you want. You want to get this credit. You want to get this merit. If you want to get this thing, if you want to receive this distinction, then it's up to you to make the connection between your project, the thing that you're interested in, and this requirement. And you can do that. And here's some tools to help you make that connection. So understanding what the targets are from the outset. The second role is as a controller is auditing. So I no longer do evaluation, but I still audit. So just like when you know, peers are handing back feedback on their you know, on other students, other learners' contributions, I'm really auditing that. You said that you thought this was outstanding. Is it really outstanding? Can I believe what you said? You said that you did 30 minutes of homework. I don't know. Yeah, you said you went for dinner with your grandmother last night. Did you really? Where's the evidence? Did you, you know, and really, you know, auditing in much the same way that a tax system, you know, individual business owners in the tax system, you know, they report your own taxes, and most of us don't get audited. But the sort of the consequence for non-compliance is so great that mostly we're honest when we report our taxes, at least for the most part. And that leads to the third part, that fraud, that being inauthentic or inaccurate results in some kind of consequence, especially restricted choice, because this is all about facilitating decision makers. It's about saying, well, if you can't report with integrity, then you know, that results in less opportunity for choice. And as you demonstrate more integrity, you have more capacity for choice. And the two go sort of hand in hand. And in such a way that actually we can separate the two roles of sort of service to young people and control. I think we were talking about the two distinct elements being supporting learners' choice and holding learners accountable. So even if I am, if my role is service, right, really supporting learners' choice, someone else can play the role of auditor. You know, it's not necessary for me to be, for one person to play both roles. You know, really see them as distinct functions. And I think by doing that and inviting, it can make the desire to set up prescribed obstacle courses less appealing, because I find that you know, as I said at the beginning, while not all young people are entrepreneurial, in my experience, all of us are enabled and enterprising in some capacity, and we have that inclination to be productive. You know, idleness or you know, indulgence in consumerism, those are ultimately empty pursuits, and part of being a healthy adult is being productive. And so that sort of leads to the second point, which is really what we're doing by trying to promote and prompt student-directed, inquiry-based learning is we're shifting culture. We're shifting the culture to one that celebrates, you know, efforts to succeed, is less focused on raising the floor on, we're less focused on raising the floor on failure and more interested on pushing the ceiling of success. And we can do that by promoting earned distinction, you know, legitimate authority, and offering recognition for superior performance. Because that, when it comes down to it, when it comes down to being more self-starting, really it's not about shifting policy. It's not even about you know, accessing more resources, because I'm fond of saying the most underutilized resource in education today are students. Really, it's about shifting culture, and I think that about brings me to the end of what feels like talking and talking and talking, which is not my custom. I tend to much prefer, you know, really feeding your interest and your inclination. But this was the design. If you have any questions, we have about 10 minutes. I can keep talking. I've got lots of these little, you know, little phrases that I like to say. But the mics are open if anybody wants to ask a question, or you can type into the how do you refer to that? The little panel at the bottom, the chat box. And I guess just as a final note to those of you working within institutional context, it's, I mean, really, I think that, you know, alt ed and homeschooling, these have been, you know, communities that have been developing for generations now. I think that where, you know, industrial models of education have been able to succeed is in a sort of, you know, sort of a stable, growth-oriented environment, which is for the most part what we enjoyed in the 20th century, at least here in the West. But in an environment where that is more unstable and where growth is less available, it's really about development. And I think these kinds of premises that homeschooling community has been developing, they offer great value. And I didn't talk a lot about it, but if you are interested in more that I'm happy to share. If you email me, Eric@lifewellspent, LIFEWELLSPENT.ca. I'm happy to share resources, happy to offer support, whether it's around finance, positive psychology, design thinking, or even just resources that I've developed over time. Yeah, more than happy to make them available. So yeah, seems like there aren't too many questions, really any questions. So I hope this has offered some value to you here today. I'll stick around for a couple more minutes. And otherwise, I hope you have enjoy the rest of the conference. Thanks very much.
Hi, Eric. This is Nikki. Thank you so much for doing your presentation. From what I heard as I was roaming through the other rooms, it was a fantastic presentation. I noticed that Steve has taken off already.
Yeah, that's it was my pleasure. Thanks, Nikki. And I guess one thing I'll be interested in is I guess these are being recorded and made available. Wondering how to find both this one and the others. I'm gonna have to jump out for the rest of the afternoon, especially John Mighton. I'm a huge fan of John and his work, and would love to be able to access some of the other sessions.
Oh, absolutely. No, you should be able to. It goes straight to the page that carries the actual entrance links. go to the conference website there, and those links are converted after we close out this session. Those links are converted to archived links, and it's just a matter of minutes. So
okay, terrific. Well, I guess
that's where you can find them.
Okay, okay. So I guess I'll wrap the recording now, and I'll just close out anybody else who's left in the room, and again, thank you for your help today.
Oh, absolutely. And I can help you close out too. That's why I came back. Your volunteer moderator went into another room, so that's why I stayed for you and just kind of kept an eye on things. So feel free to turn off the recording